Hello and welcome to part 3 of Nature's Brushstrokes, a little course exploring how we can use watercolour to explore the natural world. So if you haven't watched part 1 or part 2, you need to go back and do that. So part 1 was about the sea and part 2 was about forest. And this week we're going to be exploring the sky. And as in the previous tutorials, I really want you to look out of the window at the sky where you live. This is really important. Welcome. Welcome if you are new. My name is Cate Field, artist, teacher and speaker, passionate about helping you develop your creativity. And I really hope you're going to enjoy this one. Again, we're going to be using just watercolour paints, various different techniques that I hope will inspire you to start really developing your own work. So, let's go. So in this third part of Nature's Brushstrokes, we're going to be looking at the sky. We're going to start off by just doing some very tiny studies, because what I want to do is to just have a bit of a play. I'm going to put some water directly onto the papers. You could use a spray, but I'm just going to use my very, very soft brush. And I'm going to be using these paint palettes, and I'm going to be using these, but you use whatever you want. And we're going to start off by mixing quite a vibrant turquoisey blue with grey. You could also mix it with a bit of white, which is kind of breaking all the rules of watercolour. But those of you who have followed me for some time will know I'm not that good with rules. And I'm just going to put some paint over the top. Now that light's shining too much on there. Just a little bit of the paint like this. Just going to leave that one there. Pick this one up. Get my spray. Use the same colours. So this technique, very, very similar to when we looked at the sea. You're building on your techniques. I'm going to leave those to dry. I'm going to come back and show you what I do with those. It's going to move on to the next two. Now you see, I'm doing this in real time, so you're going to be working quickly. Let's put this water on here. This time I've actually got a very pale blue here, which I do like. It's quite a kind of a chalky type of blue. Add some of the other blue. Just going to put that there. This paper is about 200 grams per square metre, so it's not that thick, so it will buckle a little bit, but that's okay because these are just little experiments. Wet on wet, the wet paper, the very wet paint. And it's a different type of technique to ones that we have done before, but similar in other aspects. So we're going to get my spray, slightly bigger piece of paper, still the same sort of weight, wet on wet. Going to dab, bit more water, let the paint just float across the page, and then I'm going to get a bit of tissue. And I'm just going to take up some of the paint. And I want you to have a bit of a practice with this, because we're going to use this technique. I'm just going to add another colours of, I'm sticking to blue at the moment. We're going to go into storm clouds and sunrises and sunsets a little bit later. But I just want to put in sort of darker blue, still wet,
tissue start to lift. Get this idea of a bit of clouds. And leave that. Whenever you are working with watercolour, you need to work quickly and not to labour. I've said this a few times before. Still doing this sort of wet on wet, wet brush, wet paint, wet paper. And you do have to do a few for you to kind of stop being scared about it, I think. I say this with my students a lot, because there's a fear. And this is why it's really good to work on this sort of size paper. And so you can just chop up bits of wallpaper and have this as some of your practice. You could also work directly into a sketchbook if you want to, and make little notes on the techniques that you've done. I'm going to leave that one to dry, but you'll end up with a lot. So maybe a dozen of these kind of little sizes where you're just trying lots of different ways of just using wet on wet on wet. So I've got some more of my little pieces here, and we're going to start to introduce grey. Now I like to create my own greys. I like to use blue, and then I'll add brown, some brown in there, like that, and then purple. And we're going to see what that looks like. Oh, I should have done some water on these. There we go. Let's just have a look. It's still a little bit too blue. We're going to add a bit more brown into that, and then a bit more purple. So you're beginning to sort of break up that, like that one. Quite liking that. Let's move that there. And all of these experiments, again, if you put them into your sketchbook, your journal, and then you can start to sort of build up like a little catalogue. Let's put that in there. A little catalogue of the different sorts of colours that you really like. I'm going to move that one there. I'm going to keep this one, so I'm just going to put water on it rather than spray. And now this time I'm going to add some green. Again, it's going to give us a different sort of grey. So I'm not using black. I think that's the key for these ones. I do use black sometimes, but not on this. I'd rather kind of be playing with mixing. I really like this. This is beginning to look like the storm clouds that we had here just a few days ago, actually. And again, you can get a tissue, lift some of the paint, and let's do that one as well, a little bit too wet. I'm going to leave that to dry. When they're dry, we can work over the top of them. So while we're leaving those to dry, I'm just going to do another technique. This is time the paper is dry. I'm going to go back to my sort of pale blue here, and I'm just going to put a line, just a few lines, just using the soft edge of the brush. Then I'm going to make the brush wet, let the paint move about. So we get a slightly different technique. And I'm going to add some darker blue. this. Now, I really encourage all of my students to get outside and look at the sky. I want you to take photos and just be really observant and look at the colours of the sky, different times of the day, different times of the year, all the different types of weather. Now, obviously, if you live somewhere where it's blue sky and sunshine all the time, the sky is not actually going to be that interesting. But if you live in England or Scotland or Wales, then you're going to have lots of fabulous skies. And wherever you are, you can explore just by looking outside and just seeing. And where I live by the sea, and so the sky and the sea are linked together, and you can get some really interesting light where I am. And this morning, sunrise was phenomenal. We've had a few storms. We had first fluttering of snow. If you're watching this is end of November. We don't have a lot of snow in this bit of England. So when we do get it, we all get really excited. Whereas our friends in different parts of the world or different parts of the country all think we're a little bit pathetic down here. So this is quite a subtle, I'm going to pop that, very subtle here. Now, I've got some leftover, these are scraps, the things that I did before and just trying out new things. I'm just going to tear that one up, I'm just going to use it. This is 300 grams, so it's quite thick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry my brush just a little bit, and I'm going to just do some lines. So this is going to be more of like a fantasy type sky. I just want to show you a different sort of technique. Little bit of water, not too much. Again, I'm not bringing in any of the kind of sunrise, sunset colours just yet. Just sort of playing with this quite dry brush, moving the paint around. We put in that kind of block there, then add some water to that top bit. And the bottom bit, and then just see how the paint moves. Now obviously your sky and your seas technique can be, oh, that's a bit too much, that's a bit too wet, but never mind, we'll just leave that there. They're going to be very similar. So some of your little doodles and sketches, you might think, oh, that the sky and the sea look exactly the same, and that is the case sometimes. And what we'll do a little bit later on in this tutorial is we'll do the sun and the sky, the sun, the sky and the sea, but we'll also do the sky as a background for the natural world, woodlands, fields, that kind of stuff, but also how we can put the sky in an urban environment. So we'll do that as well. Again, just playing with that. If you think it's just too wet, just get your tissue. Just lift some of the colour. And we get lovely kind of streaks in the sky when the aeroplanes are flying very high, go over. So again, I'm going to just leave that one to dry. So all my smaller pieces have dried. I've just taken these two because what I want to show you now is a technique to create what we call in Dorset, and probably in other parts of the country as well, a mackerel sky. And it's where the clouds form this amazing pattern. And so this is dry. I'm going to add some blue, so kind of turquoisey blue, and some royal blue, like this. And then within that, I'm going to add some crimson, just a little bit, like this. And then I'm going to use a piece of corrugated cardboard. Just going to pick up a bit of the paint, and then I'm going to kind of put this sort of marks across the sky very faintly. Just kind of pick up, just using a little bit of texture on there, and then turning it around the other way, and then just giving it a little bit of a rub, and it's going to give this sort of effect, which I quite like. Now I'm going to add a bit of water, and I'm just going to push the paint around just a little bit to have these sort of marks that go across the sky. Now, this is now wet, and so what will happen is that you get these streaks that go onto the paper, and you can start moving some of this around, and it just kind of brings a different feel to the sky. So I'm just going to move that one out of the way, and I'm going to see what happens. Let's just spray this one, and I'm now going to do one that is much more red, so kind of really get that kind of crimsony purpley colour going. And this is why it's so great to work on just tiny pieces. Let's just put in little bits of marks into the wet, and we're just picking up this, again, this idea, and they're quite abstract, and it's very much you're playing with an idea, and I can't stress this enough, actually. It's so important, and some of them won't look great, but some might. I'm just going to move those over. I'm just going to take a clean piece, and I'm going to go straight in with this purple on top of the white, just so that you can see the sort of marks that are made using the cardboard. I'm going to show you just a different technique. And then what happens if we were then to put in, say we put in a bit of yellow into this, bit more water, let that move around. It's going to look messy. Remember, we always have to go through a messy stage. Let's add a bit of crimson into that, and we're going to start to get something that is really dramatic. And again, it might not be quite what you want, but you're just trying out another idea. I'm going to come back and show you what I do with these just a bit later on. But again, it's that kind of, the sky is really complex, and I absolutely love it. I'm just going to add more water and let that just kind of fade through. And sometimes when I'm looking at the sky near to where I live, it's just breathtaking, because it just kind of like, oh my goodness, that doesn't even look real. Right, I'm now going to go back into doing kind of this storm idea, and I've mixed sort of a purple and green together to get this. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to use the side of my brush again to create some marks like this. Different mark making on this piece of paper. I'm going to take my bit of cardboard. Let's just kind of get some bit sort of darker over this side, bit paler over this side. Now what I want to do is to create a storm cloud. So we're going to have this cloud over here. Just going to add a bit more of the green. So straight in with the green, straight in with some purple. Again, it's that kind of, don't be afraid to try out the different colours. Just having this as kind of a background. I'm going to add some water, move that about. So again, very, very abstract. Just going to add a bit more of the kind of dark grey into that, like that. And then quite often when we have a storm, there's like little hints of yellow in the sky. The light can look very strange sometimes. So I'm just going to put in a little bit of that, move that into there. And I'm just going to leave that one to dry. Right, I did want to do a more stylized sky, and so I'm doing dry paper. I'm just going to put in some greys and blues like this. So it's still pretty wet, like this. So I'm doing like horizontal lines like this. I'm going to pick up my bit of card. I want to get that idea of the streaks coming across the sky like that. And then I'm going to get a little bit of sponge. It's just a natural sponge. Start to just lift some of the paint so that you get the white underneath, like that. Ooh. And I'm quite liking that. It's quite subtle. Just get that down here, and let's just bring a bit of blue into that, so we've got this wispy. So refer back to your own photos and that sort of thing. Let's bring those like that. And again, it's kind of a bit more linear with those bits going across the sky like that. And I'm going to leave those ones to dry and then come back and show you what I do with them. So while I'm waiting for those ones to dry, again, I'm going to use the paper as the clouds. So I'm just kind of doing a cloud type shape. Again, just enjoying the process. Like this. And again, you can play with lots of different ideas. Let's have another kind of shape here. And then we can indulge in that wonderful daydream activity of looking at the clouds and turning them into magical things. Who doesn't love doing that? Again. So it's the paper that is, the white of the paper becomes the white of the clouds, and we're just doing those, and then we're just going to add just a few little bits into our cloud. And again, do some studies, take your own photos, and then that's my little cloud like that. So now let's really look at those colours of the sunset, shall we? Let's put in just some water just on one half. And then I'm going to go straight in with crimson along that, like that. Can you see how that just like bleeds in? It's just gorgeous, isn't it? Now I'm going to turn this round. I'm going to put another line of water underneath. So some of that crimson will start to little bleed out. And then I'm going to go in with orange, just along there, like that. Just going to turn that around again. And yeah, the colours will leak, because that is actually what happens. We have this kind of wonderful spreading of the colours. Now I'm just going to put in more of a kind of an orangey red. Again, the water is quite wet. The water is quite wet. I don't believe I just said that. The paper is quite wet. Oh dear me. There we go. Really just, this piece is where I'm just playing with moving the paint around to get the sort of colours that I want. Let's just put in another line in there. This is why it's so good to work on these like little tiny ones. So I'm just covering that like that. Let's just do that. I'm just going to take off some of this with my tissue, which I've just misplaced. Right, here we are, just ordinary bit of tissue. Just going to lift some of the water. Like this. And then you can start thinking about how you want to use your sky pieces. Are you going to have them as a backdrop to a seascape, or maybe a cityscape, or a countryside, or perhaps a silhouette of a tree? So we're just going to let that just float. And then at the top here, I'm going to put some really dark blue. Let me just pop that in there. It's almost like a turquoisey blue into that, just that top bit. So as if like this, the sun is, I haven't actually put in the sun in this piece. This is just where the sun creates these patterns and colours in the sky. So I'm just going to leave that one to dry, and let's imagine that we do have our sun. I'm going to put some water in here, and now we're going to have our sun. Now let's just put in, yes, look at that, I love this. This is just, let's just put that in like that. And you see how that all bleeds out so beautifully. Our crimson sky. Move that round. This is going to be our sun, and when it dries, you'll see the effect better. Just going to put in a bit of blue at the top there. I'm not going to let the blue go into my sun at the moment because I don't want green. I want to kind of keep that a bit separate. And then we can, when it's dry, we can put in a little bit more detail. Because at the moment it looks like some kind of explosion, doesn't it? But that's okay. I'm going to go back to this one, which is now dry. And I am going to put in my sun. Like this, so the warmth and the yellow is there. So I'm going to put in my sun onto the dry paper like that. I'm going to get some crimson around the edges. So we put that there. So again, it will look a bit of a mess. Start to some of that bleed out. Because that is kind of what it looks like, especially when you have a sunset or a sunrise by the sea. It's like the sun bleeds into the sea. It's just extraordinary. Just getting that. Leaving these, I like this sort of purple streaks that I'm getting here. If I think it's a little bit too wet, just get a tissue. Just lift some of the paint. I want to have an idea of the circle. Like this, just sort of bringing that up. Leaving that to dry again before I'll do a little bit more on that. But you can see that this sort of technique is not exact, and some things are going to look better than others, and you always go through a messy stage. But I quite liking that. Now I think it needs to be darker. I'm just going to bring in some darker, where's my deep, that's it, the deep. This is me mixing kind of that dark green and purple. I think it works really well. We have this almost like we're having this storm, but then the sun has broken through, and suddenly it's like, whoa, very exciting. So I thought we'll come back to this one, which is dry. Didn't take too long to dry. And again, I'm just going to get a bit of orange, and I'm going to put my sun, a little bit of sun there in that bit. So I thought that would be quite fun. going to leave that one. So I'm going to show you all the ones that we've done so far, and then how I put them into my sketchbook and my journal. So all of these experimental pieces are dry now. I've put these into my sketchbook. Just put a little comment beside them. And when I teach this in my real life classes, and especially when I'm teaching A-level or diploma or undergraduate, I really encourage people to write and annotate on their work because it's really helpful. So you could just write what you did, the process, the colours that you used, but you could also write how you feel about what you did. And the other thing that I did was to create a little journal, and there's some space to write a few lines of poetry or just some prose. And again, it's quite a nice way to use up some of these little pieces that you think, oh, not quite sure what I'm going to do with those. And I like to have these books. They make me very happy, and I've got lots and lots of them. So how you present your work is entirely up to you. These are just suggestions.
I really hope you enjoyed that and that you've got lots of ideas, that you've got some thoughts on how you can develop your work and how you can sort of start doing things in maybe a slightly different way. And if you want to start really developing your work further, you might want to look at this one. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.